The franchise tag deadline came and went on Tuesday. The Raiders did not use the franchise tag. Many teams around the league did. We'll tell you who that was and how it could affect the silver and black moving forward. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 6th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, we definitely appreciate that. Appreciate my man Ari, who makes sure we're up on YouTube, looking good and sounding good each and every day. You can hit him up on Twitter at Ari Produces. And of course, Raider Nation, without you, there is no show. Or if there is a show, it really doesn't matter because, well, without you, there is no support of the show. So we definitely appreciate you as well. You can hit me up on Twitter at your boy Q254, and you can chime in at the show 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. A lot of feedback that has to do with the quarterback. We've having a lot of quarterback conversation here on the show. I had my guy Jeff Howe from The Athletic, the conversation I had with him on Tuesday on the show. He did a little deep dive on all the top 6 quarterbacks in the upcoming draft, and so a lot of response to that conversation. So we'll get as much feedback as possible coming up in segment number 3 of today's show. Segment number 2, we'll turn our attention to free agency. The legal tampering period begins next Monday. That's the 11th. That's when teams can negotiate with players. They can agree on a deal, but it cannot become finalized until they sign, seal, and deliver it on the 13th, which is the first day of the new league year. But on Monday, the 11th, that's when the legal tampering period does begin. So we'll talk a little bit of free agency and where I think the Raiders need to put their attention to when they spend their free agency money, something that Tom Telesco mentioned that he's going to do. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2, plus where I think that, like I said, they'll focus their attention. All that has to do with free agency. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, talk about, well, the news and notes around the league, and most of it has to do with the franchise tag. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And remember last year, the Raiders used the franchise tag on Josh Jacobs. We found out pretty early in the process that was not going to happen, and they did not put the franchise tag on anyone. Again, that's not something that we thought was going to happen, something that was not a surprise that there was no franchise tag, and that's fine. The Raiders do have 16 to 17 free agents of their own, but none of them were worth the franchise tag, including Josh Jacobs, who would have been about $14 million. And I don't see Tom Telesco, I don't see any team across the league spending that kind of money on a free agent running back. And if you look at it and you look across the league, no running back got hit with the franchise tag. So what has to do with the franchise tag? What are we talking about? A team could put a franchise tag on any player that they don't want to let out of the building. What does that mean if it's a non-exclusive franchise tag? Well, that means that teams could talk to that player, and if that player decides to agree to a deal and the team does not, match that and sign their player, then that team that put the franchise tag on that player is liable to get 2 first-round draft picks for that player when he signs with the new club. A lot of times that does not happen, and teams will have until July 15th to work out a long-term deal. So 8 guys got hit with the non-exclusive franchise tag on Tuesday. Off top, my guy, Baltimore Raven, Justin Matabuke, the defensive tackle. He's 26 years old. He was the guy that I was really hoping that the Raiders were going to be able to turn their attention to and maybe bring him in as a free agent. Didn't think that the Ravens were going to be dumb enough to let him hit free agency, and they weren't. They hit him with the franchise tag. Again, not a surprise, but he's off the open market unless a team out there, the Raiders or anyone else, decides, 2 first-round picks is worth it. Now, you could always negotiate a contract. There could be a sign and trade. There's a lot of different things that could still happen, but for the most part, when these guys sign that franchise tag, more times than not, they don't leave that team. The Carolina Panthers, they hit the franchise tag with Brian Burns. For a while now, they've had Brian Burns in the mix, and they won't trade him. There's been multiple teams that have asked to get him, and they've been trying to offer a first-round pick. The Panthers have not done that. I will say, because they don't have a first-round pick this year because of the Bryce Young trade, I wouldn't be surprised if they did actually do a sign and trade and end up getting a first-round pick or a little bit more in return for Brian Burns. So that's kind of a guy that I pay attention to see, does he really stick with the Carolina Panthers? The Chicago Bears, they hit the tag on Jalen Johnson, the cornerback. He was another guy that I had some interest in, but didn't think that the Bears were going to let him go, and they won't. Right, the young man from the 559, Fresno, California, went to Utah. I liked him a lot coming out of college. He's got an opportunity now to really score and get some money, right? He's going to get hit with at least $19 million for 1 year. That's a fully guaranteed deal on the franchise tag if he doesn't get that long-term deal worked out by July 15th. But more likely than not, they'll get that long-term deal. So Jalen Johnson got hit with the franchise tag. The Cincinnati Bengals hit wide receiver T. Higgins with that. I also believe that that's another sign and trade. I'll be surprised that T. Higgins actually plays for the Bengals in 2024. Had a down year, was injured quite a bit, so I don't think that he's going to end up staying in Cincinnati, but they want to make sure that they get some kind of compensation. He doesn't just walk. The Indianapolis Colts hit Michael Pittman, the wide receiver, with the franchise tag, and I don't know why I wasn't thinking of Michael Pittman. It was funny when that news rolled out. It was like a surprise to me. Not that he didn't deserve the franchise tag. I just didn't think about him. And, of course, Anthony Richardson is coming back from injury. His rookie year got cut short. They need to have as many weapons around him as possible. They have Jonathan Taylor. They gave him the long-term deal last year after a slight holdout. So they need to have their wide receiver as well. So Michael Pittman, he's going to get that long-term deal done in Indianapolis. As a placeholder, though, they hit him with the franchise tag. The Jaguars hit Josh Allen with the franchise tag. He's a guy that gets after the quarterback. Makes a lot of sense. He's not going to go anywhere. He'll stay in Jacksonville. Kansas City Chiefs hit L'Jarius Sneed with the franchise tag. Now, he's a guy that they actually granted the rights to, not the rights, but they granted permission to last week to go out there and seek a trade. So do not be surprised L'Jarius Sneed ends up doing the little sign and tag. He probably will not play for Kansas City. He's going to try to break the bank, and I think that Kansas City is going to do everything that they can to get some good compensation. But I don't believe that L'Jarius Sneed is actually in the long-term plans for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, they offered him and gave him permission last week to go out there and seek a trade. So look for L'Jarius Sneed to be on the move. I don't think the Raiders will be in play for him just because you have to give up multiple picks. And there's a pretty deep corner class in this draft that I could see the Raiders saying, yeah, you know what, he would be great, but instead we'll just go ahead and dip into the draft and get a guy that we believe can be ours for some years and match up with Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they hit the tag on Antoine Winfield. This one surprised me. I talked about it on Tuesday's show. I thought that they were going to hit the tag with Baker Mayfield. I actually thought Antoine Winfield was going to get that long-term deal done. He didn't. So they hit him with the franchise tag. They're still working on it. It's expected to happen. But what that does is expose Baker Mayfield. If he doesn't get a deal worked out before the new league year opens up, and matter of fact, before the 11th, when the legal tampering period opens up, any team, including the Raiders, could reach out and say, hey, I know you might want to go back to Tampa Bay. It probably is the place that wants you back, but here's the offer that we got for you. And he could end up being on his way by way of free agency. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is kind of leaving their quarterback out there for the potential pickup by a team. They already signed Mike Evans. They got Winfield on the franchise tag. They can't really hold on to make Baker Mayfield unless they sign him to a long-term deal. So that one was a shock to me. I really was. I was caught off guard. I expected him to be a guy that was going to, like I said, get hit with the franchise tag. So they made sure that they kept him in town. I still think that more likely than not, he returns to Tampa Bay on probably a 2 to 3 year deal, similar to what Daniel Jones got with the Giants. But it was pretty strange. I guess strange isn't maybe not the right word, but it was pretty surprising to see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers leave him out there when we all know how difficult it is for teams to find a quarterback, and they had some really good success with Baker Mayfield last season. So he's a guy that could end up somewhere else. He could end up with the Raiders, could end up in Minnesota, could end up in Atlanta, could end up in, well, anywhere that needs a quarterback, right? New England, Washington, any of the teams at the top that are looking at quarterbacks right now that are talking about drafting a guy, they might say, you know what, let's go with Baker Mayfield and take him from right underneath Tampa Bay's nose. And again, pretty surprising that they let him out there. Also, the transition tag was hit by the Patriots. They put Kyle Duggar, the safety. So he's now out there where he can go negotiate a deal with any team across the league, and the Patriots have the opportunity to match that offer. If they don't match the offer, he goes to that team, but they do get compensation in return. And the only thing that's kind of surprising about that is that means that their tackle, Mike Onwenu, is out there and available and is going to be a free agent. Matter of fact, we'll bring him up coming up in segment number 2 when I talk about where the Raiders could spend their free agency money. As Tom Telesco, the GM, told us at the Combine last week, that he was going to spend more money in free agency than he normally likes to, but he feels like the Raiders are going to have to. So we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. NFL season is long gone. I know college basketball is heating up, but so is the NBA. And right now you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. All new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's as simple as that. $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. Don't know if you saw the Celtics and the Cavaliers and saw how Cleveland made that come-from-behind victory. They were down 20 points in the fourth quarter, came back and got it done. Dean Wade, not D Wade, not Dwayne Wade, but Dean Wade had 20 points in the fourth quarter, only had 23 in the whole game, had 20 in the fourth quarter, outscored the Celtics 20-17, and gave Cleveland the 105-104 victory. That's called playoff basketball. And I know it's not the playoffs, but it's just getting you ready for what the playoffs are going to be like. So what you need to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, shoot your shot. You're guaranteed to miss a shot you don't take. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about free agency as that's right around the corner. Legal tampering period opens up on Monday. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing what the Raiders are going to do. And the Raiders are at, plus $42-45 million in salary cap space. When they make some moves, they'll be way above that as well. So they've got plenty of cash. They got plenty of money to go ahead and spend and try to increase the roster, build up the roster. And we'll learn a lot about their draft plans by what they do through free agency, kind of where their focus is in free agency. Will give you an idea of, okay, what they may dedicate themselves to coming up in the draft. But this is one of the major steps, obviously, in building the roster. Last week at the Scouting Combine, when we had an opportunity to meet up with Tom Telesco, I asked him what his philosophy was when it came to building a team, and it was free agency, having the money, as opposed to building a team through the draft. Here's what Tom Telesco had to say.
What is your philosophy when it comes to free agency about, building the team and maybe not going too deep into free agency, kind of building it with the draft as well?
Yeah, the philosophy is we want to re-sign our own players rather than go sign somebody else's UFAs. That's the philosophy. However, you do have to supplement your roster with UFAs. And then this year, with where we are, we're going to have to sign some free agents. It's basically it's an all new regime as far as coaches and GM. And there's some things we need to do to get up and running. So we may have to use free agency a little more this year than typically I would like, but it's going to be part of the process. You just have to be very careful in free agency. I know the cap went up this year, which is great. But it doesn't matter if it's 255 or 555. It's the same group of players that are available. And unfortunately, the success rate isn't that high. In football, when you change teams as a free agent. Very few of those guys even finish their contract when they sign a big UFA contract. So got to be very cautious with it, spend the money wisely. But yeah, we're going to have to, probably go that route a little bit more this year than usual. But you have to use all avenues in this league between free agency, draft, street players, trades. You just can't really have, hey, we're draft only. It just doesn't work.
So there you go. You heard what he had to say. You heard what he had to say about $255 million or $555 million. You don't want to get too crazy when it comes to spending free agency money more times than not. When you give out a free agent contract, players don't even live up that whole contract, right? And we see it more times than not. The most recent example for us was Chandler Jones. We all know how that went south quick, fast, in a hurry. So he's obviously cautious and aware of what goes on in free agency, and a lot of that is fool's gold, right? These guys are free agents for a reason. But he also said that they're probably going to have to use free agency more than he'd like just to get the Raiders where they need to be. So what does that exactly mean? Well, for me, I'm looking at the Raiders and their roster. First of all, internally, they have 17 guys that are free agents. The biggest names: Josh Jacobs, Jermaine Illuminor, John Jenkins, Amik Robertson, Isaiah Palomau, right? Those are basically some of the big names that stand out to me as far as the Raiders and their free agents go. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is a priority, right? I think that they'll get something done with him. I'm not too sure exactly what it's going to cost, but I do believe to see Josh Jacobs back in the Raiders uniform in 2024. I do believe that another priority for the Raiders has to be their guys along the offensive line. They have three starters, not just three offensive linemen, three starters of their own as free agents: Andre James, Jermaine Illuminor, Greg Van Roten. They also have Brandon Parker and Jordan Meredith that are depth, that are backup guys. So 5 guys along the offensive line are free agents, but to have 3 of your starters, that's a big deal. So they have to decide, and when I say they, I'm talking about Tom Telesco, have to decide who that they look at the offensive line that they want to bring back. Like at the combine, as you heard what he had to say about about free agency in general, he didn't have a glowing review about the offensive line. They were pretty good when it came to pass blocking, a little bit of struggle when it came to the run blocking. So it sounds like he wants to upgrade the offensive line. Matter of fact, here's what Tom Telesco had to say about the O-line. This is also from the combine back in Indy.
You mentioned offensive line. What was your evaluation of that unit last year, and what do you look at as far as the guys in the market like Andre and Jermaine?
As a group of five, they did a pretty good job in pass protection. And run game wasn't bad as well. Third down, it's everybody involved. Third down wasn't great. Red zone play wasn't really good, but as far as they held up pretty well last year. A group that was kind of put together, a little bit draft, a little bit of free agency, a little bit of late signings. So we'd like to get some consistency in there with that group. Usually O-line consistency takes a number of years to get there. And you're talking about 5 starters, plus you need at least 2 more after that really can come in and play. So it just takes time to kind of build that and get that together. And I'd like to have a group that's kind of plays together consistently. Even in the free agency era, it's hard, but you can still kind of get there. So it may take some time to get it exactly where you want it, but we've got some areas there that is the free agency. We got some holes there.
Okay, so there you go. So there's Tom Telesco talking about the offensive line again. Their starters: Andre James, the center; Jermaine Illuminor, he could play guard or tackle, right tackle; Greg Van Roten, left guard, right guard, whatever the position is, he could play, right? So you look at Andre James and you figure, all right, well, Dylan Parham could go into that position at the center spot, or maybe he stays at left guard and the Raiders draft a center. Who knows? But the trenches obviously have to be addressed, and that could be done by free agents, outside free agents. It could be done by the draft. It could be done by both. But I think that when the Raiders look to spend money in free agency, it's got to be on the offensive line between their free agents and outside free agents, and also the defensive line. Again, I think it's all about the trenches. Bilal Nichols is a free agent. Adam Butler, free agent. John Jenkins, free agent. All those guys played significant roles on the Raiders' defensive line this past year. I'm not saying that all 3 are going to come back, but they're all guys that should be under consideration. I don't think that they're going to break the bank, but again, it's the trenches, and I think that's where the Raiders need to spend a lot of their free agency money. I already mentioned Josh Jacobs, but if you just want to look at some outside free agents, let's look at the defensive line first, because I really only got one. Again, Justin Matabuke, the one that I really was hoping that the Raiders were going to have an opportunity to get from the Baltimore Ravens, is hit with the franchise tag, so he's not going anywhere. Christian Wilkins, if you look at Pro Football Focus and you look at the top 200 when it comes to free agents, he's listed as number 7. They said Wilkins hoped to get an extension done before the 2023 season, but didn't let the lack of many at the position slow him down. Wilkins is as good a run defender as any interior defensive lineman in the league, setting career highs in every pass rushing category this season, including pass rush win rate, pressure rate, sacks, quarterback hits, and pressures. Christian Wilkins, the 7th-ranked highest, free agent according to Pro Football Focus, and he had 9.5 sacks last year. As far as, with the Miami Dolphins. And that was a career year. And it was also a contract year. So that's always something to pay attention to. But if there's one guy that I think would be worth visiting on the defensive line, I look at Christian Wilkins. Then I flip over to the offensive side. And the rest of the guys I'm going to tell you about are all offensive linemen. And I think that they all should be under consideration. Obviously, I'm not saying the Raiders need to bring them all in, but I think that the Raiders should be definitely looking at all these guys. Number 24 on Pro Football Focus, top 200 free agent list. Guard Kevin Dotson from the Rams said Dotson was traded from the Steelers to the Rams this offseason, and what first appeared like an odd fit should have instead been a signal that head coach Sean McVay was reinventing his offense to much success in 2023. McVay pivoted from a wide zone rushing attack to a heavy gap scheme. Dotson was a picture-perfect fit. He has always been a strong pass protector, which carried over as well. Again, it's a guard. So if you do slide Dylan Parham over to the center position, maybe a guy like Dotson slides into the guard position, you feel very comfortable with what he can do. Always been a really good, strong pass protector, but his run blocking was really good as well, something that's got to be very effective for the Raiders. They definitely want to lean on their run game. 26th highest free agent, according to Pro Football Focus. I mentioned him earlier in the show. Tackle Mike Onwenu from the New England Patriots. It said Onwenu had been shuffled around endlessly throughout his rookie contract, but returned to right tackle in Week 7 of 2023, the position he seems most comfortable playing as a solid pass protector and a strong gap scheme blocker with good footwork to combo block at the line and to get to the second level fairly well. He's not the quickest player off the line, given his massive frame, but has the strength to wall off backside pursuit defenders in the run game with a solid base and heavy hands when called upon. So there you go. Right tackle, his natural position, somewhere he plays really well. Maybe you sign Jermaine Illuminor to slide into that right guard spot, and then you put Onwenu there at the right tackle spot. Now all of a sudden you got Colton Miller and Onwenu as the bookends. You got Dylan Parham there in the center position. You slide Dotson in to the left guard, and you got Jermaine Illuminor at the right guard. Now maybe you have a really solid offensive line, and that's what Antonio Pierce wants. That's what the Raiders are going to want. That's what Tom Telesco wants, is really solid trenches. Okay, you don't want to go that direction? That's fine. How about guard Robert Hunt from the Miami Dolphins? Comes in at number 28 on the Pro Football Focus top 200 free agent list. It came as a bit of surprise that Hunt was not the young Dolphins offensive lineman agreeing to terms on an extension before the season concluded, but it could also be a signal that he knows he can command a strong contract on the open market with a large sample size of good play. 6'6", 335 pounds. Hunt got his NFL start at tackle, lining up on either side his rookie season and holding up admirably. He found a home for the past 3 seasons at right guard and was a great fit in the team's zone rushing attack under head coach Mike McDaniel. 6'6", 335. That's a big dude at that right tackle position. I would have no problem if you lined up a guy like Robert Hunt next to a guy like Onwenu. Right? You want to talk about a bully. That could be a dude. Now, it's going to cost a lot for Hunt because he's done some really good things. And, oh, by the way, he's got the versatility to kick outside and be a tackle if need be, but has been really successful at the right guard position. So, again, just another option. I'm not saying go out and get all these guys, just other options that the Raiders could have and where I think that most of the money should be spent when it comes to free agency. Yeah, there's other holes you could fill here and there. You know, I'm not going to get upset about this guy or that guy. You're going to bring in other dudes to fill some holes, and you might release them when you go into the draft and get the guys that you're looking for. But, again, these are just ideas of priorities for me, and it comes to the Raiders and their free agency money. The last guy I got for you comes in at number 55 on the Pro Football Focus top 200 free agent list as tackle Jonah Williams from the Bengals. He's the guy that requested a trade the past offseason after the Bengals signed free agent tackle Orlando Brown Jr. to take over the left side. He eventually took back the request and got back to work, mastering his craft at right tackle. He hadn't started since his undergraduate days in college at Alabama, but the former first-round pick has always been an above-average pass protector and stayed healthy throughout the 2023 season. Williams may not have the ceiling perceived coming out of college. A high-floor pass blocker with a strong pedigree should do fairly well in unrestricted free agency with the league-wide scarcity of solid tackle play. So maybe, and I know he wants to play left tackle, maybe Jonah Williams would be comfortable at the right tackle position. Again, it's just a maybe. He's not that super high on Pro Football Focus's top 200 free agent list. He's there at number 55. But again, another guy for consideration. So those are the dudes I'm really looking at. I think the trenches is something that Tom Telesco and company should really attack through free agency and then fill other voids and holes through the draft. So who I'm looking at, they obviously got their own guys, as I mentioned before, from Andre James, Jermaine Illuminor, Greg Van Roten. I think out of those guys, Jermaine Illuminor definitely needs to come back. Brandon Parker and Jordan Meredith are depth as well. And on the defensive line, Bilal Nichols, Adam Butler, John Jenkins. I would love to see Jenkins come back. And maybe give me 2. Let me get greedy. Jenkins and Butler. And then Josh Jacobs is obviously a priority. But Christian Wilkins on the defensive line, Kevin Dotson on the offensive line, Mike Onwenu on the offensive line, Robert Hunt the same, Jonah Williams. All those guys should be under consideration, in my opinion, to help fill the need of the trenches for the silver and black. So that's what I got for you for segment number 2. Your calls and texts are coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast at 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money's back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text, off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Zach, calling out of Livermore. He's calling to find a little compare and contrast between J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels, and has a little info to back it up. Here he is, Zach in Livermore.
Q, what's going on? It's Zach from Livermore. Hey, I want to bring up a subject that I know a lot of Raider Nation and the fans probably won't be too thrilled about, but I've got an individual I'm close with who works for a sports agency, and he's not necessarily Italian evaluator, but he's fairly connected to the NFL behind the scenes, so to speak, and just getting some really interesting information from him, and I think it's information that some people have already heard, but I think there's some legs to it, and that's J.J. McCarthy being the third-ranked quarterback in this draft, and in talking with him, he pointed out a few things in comparison to Jaden Daniels and said, take some individual aspects and compare them, Jaden Daniels to J.J. McCarthy. He talks about things like arm talent, velocity, release speed, accuracy, things of that nature, throwing on the run, throwing under pressure, third down throws, age, size, and mobility. And when you really start breaking it down with these categories that what I would assume some scouts are actually looking at versus what fans look at, which is some of the wow factor, the connection to AP, these types of things, you can understand why J.J. McCarthy is viewed in possibly a brighter light than Jaden Daniels. So, I just wanted to put it out there. I'm not going to be shocked if McCarthy comes off the board before Daniels. That being said, JD could definitely come off the board first. Every team has different evaluations of these players and may like him more. But I won't be surprised and I won't be upset about it. I think there's a lot to be said about J.J. McCarthy that we just haven't seen yet. But scouts behind the scenes know a lot more than we do. And anyways, that's just what I'm hearing. Another piece on that is this whole so JT the Brick the other week on Raider Nation Radio, really sort of talked about our interest in Jaden Daniels and how everyone knows it. I'll keep this part short, but that is one of two things, in my opinion. It's either got to be a smokescreen. I hope it's a smokescreen that the Raiders are doing intentionally, because if it's not, that is bad for business. There is nothing good, in my opinion, that comes out with every team knowing what your plan is and who you want. That's bad for business. I hope it's a smokescreen. Makes even more sense if it is a smokescreen, and J.J. McCarthy is actually higher on their board than Jaden Daniels, and they're trying to lead people in a different direction. So, anyways, a couple of my thoughts around the draft. Again, I know Raider Nation is going to be a little bit upset by that. I think a lot of people have their hearts set on Jaden Daniels right now, but that's what I'm thinking. Anyways, Zach from Livermore out. Love your show. First listen every day, man. Been listening for 4 or 5 years. Love what you do. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And I heard a lot of hype around J.J. McCarthy, and a lot of folks at the Combine last week talked highly about him. And, even guys like Jeff Howe and others that I've talked to have said he getting knocked down for things that he wasn't asked to do in college, things that he can't control. But the thing he did in college was win a lot of games. And I don't disagree with that. He's not my favorite quarterback, but that's not because he's not a good quarterback. It's just not my favorite. Right? I mean, I can't like everybody. So I just look at, a couple guys and I pick them out and think, man, this would be a really good quarterback for the Raiders, in my opinion. And I'm not a huge fan. Now, if the Raiders select him and pick him, then he'll probably do some really good things, and I'll definitely support him and hope that he goes out there and wins a bunch of games for the Raiders, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And that's what he did in college. And the one thing I can say is he was coached up by Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, that's an NFL head coach. So he's kind of been there, done that. He knows what he's doing. But that's, again, I think a lot of people do like JJ. I'm okay with that. Again, I heard a lot of people talking about him at the Combine and talking about him in glowing fashion. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what team decides to go get him. I've heard that Denver's interested in him. I heard Minnesota's interested in him. I've heard that teams like Atlanta could be interested in him. Even teams like New England could be potentially interested in him. So he's got a lot of suitors. He'll probably hear his name called very early on April 25th. So, again, for my money, Daniels is my guy, just like Jalen Hurts was my guy years ago, right? And it's just, like I said, I can't pick everybody. I don't want to pick everybody. I'd rather find a guy and say, hey, that's the dude I really kind of think would be the right guy for the Raiders, and just ride with that. So that's what I'm going to ride with. But, there's more than one right answer to this test, if you know what I mean. Thanks for the call, though, my man. I definitely appreciate you. And don't worry, I don't think anyone's going to be upset by your call. Up next, got a text from JR in the 818. Hey, Q, it's JR from the 818. I had an idea for a trade that would work for us, Chicago, and Washington. All right. Why not call up Washington, tell them that you want the second, they want the first. We make a three-way trade with Chicago. They get a massive haul and get our 13th pick, first for the next 2 years, and 2 third-rounders, plus Washington's second and fourth. Throw in Hunter Renfrow, and Chicago has enough ammo for the next 2 years to grab a quarterback or just build around Justin Fields. Washington gets Caleb Williams and re-grab Jaden Daniels. Free agency is going to be utilized for our defense and offensive line. I don't see any reason we don't improve next year. And if we make the playoffs, those first rounders are as good as 2 high second round picks. Let me know what you think. That's JR in the 818. And I gotta soak this in again. Why not call up Washington, tell them that you want the second, they want the first. We make a 3-way trade with Chicago. They get a massive haul and get our 13th pick. First for okay, so I get it. So the Raiders trade up with Chicago and turn around and trade with Washington at the same time. See, I don't know. I think that Washington would just say, hey, we'll just reach out to Chicago and trade with them ourselves, right? I don't think that Washington sitting there at number 2 feels like that they would need the Raiders for anything. And I don't think that Chicago would feel like they need the Raiders for anything and probably don't want to trade all the way back to 13. They probably want to trade it and stay up there at the top of the draft, if that makes sense. So, as Tashawn and Vic Tafer pointed out that, the Raiders could be trying to move up to, the 5 to 7 range. They may be trying to make a couple chess moves, right? Move up to 5 to 7 with the plans to move up to 2 to 3, right? That could happen in that way, in that order. I'm just not too sure. So I like the creativity. I just think that, and maybe I'm not understanding the trade correctly, I don't think that Chicago and Washington think that they need the Raiders involved in the trade at all. But maybe it would make sense just to get a whole lot of capital in return, but I'm not too sure how far the Chicago wants to trade back, especially since they got the number 9 overall pick as well. But thanks so much, JR, for that text. I definitely appreciate you. Got a call from Doug. He's calling out of Dallas, out the Lone Star State. He's calling to talk about J.J. McCarthy and has a message for me about J.J. Here he is, Doug from Dallas.
What up, Q? This is P. Doug from Dallas, Raiders fan, man. Not hard. I just had a quick, I just want you to stop downing J.J. McCarthy. Like, I watched every game for the last 3 years in Michigan. And this man literally just wins. He don't even get mad if he don't throw the ball. Like, this man, when he does and it's outstanding, he makes a way out of no way. And if he does make a mistake, every quarterback does. But this man is really legit. And I said that to say this. If we do, why we can't do this at the quarterback? I just want to know. If we want to sign Russ for a cheap deal, sign him. We got Aiden O'Connell, and then we still can trade up and get J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, or even old boy from Washington. Like, those 3 I'm cool with. Like, I am definitely cool with, and they can all battle. Why can't we have all 3? I never hear nobody say all 3. Let's just get all 3 and battle out. We have a coach that doesn't care about politics and all that type of stuff, or he was drafted high. He's going to play the best person. He don't care. He did that as soon as he got the thing, he took Jimmy and said, Jimmy, sit down. He cut Marcus Peters. He didn't care. Like, oh yeah, you were better. No, you ain't gonna play. You ain't going to tackle. Sit down. And that's what he did. And so, like, we got a coach that's down. We're not going to do no political stuff. Russell, if you come in with that bull, sit down. We don't care. We're not playing. Like, that's what type of coach we have now. No political stuff. We don't have none of that stuff. And just go get your quarterbacks. You got one of the best quarterback rooms now. Whoever lose. You got a backup. You got a great backup. Guess what? Russ out of there. You got still got Aiden O'Connell. I mean, maybe Aiden O'Connell wins the draft. Wins the battle. I don't know. But if he don't, we still got 2 good other options. I just don't understand it. Maybe you can help clarify this for me. I just don't know why nobody's thinking like this. It's just all I see everybody saying, no, we just going on this, or no, skip Russell. Like, Russell would be a great option, cheap, and he'll battle. Other than that, I just want to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Raider Nation. We here, baby.
Thank you for the call, my man. Appreciate you. Definitely I'm not downing or doubting McCarthy. Definitely not. He's just not my favorite. Like I said before, there's a lot of quarterbacks. There's a lot of flavor. And whatever you choose to be your, favorite is cool. That's awesome, right? And so you watched more Michigan football than I did, so you're probably closer to the product and understand why you like JJ more. I happen to see more LSU and watch more Jaden Daniels and know what he brings to the table, and I like him more. I like the fact that he has a relationship with AP. I think that goes a long way. I think Antonio Pierce wants to have a team full of guys that he has some kind of relationship with. I just think that it makes a lot of sense. So that's another reasoning for it. But I'm not doubting J.J. McCarthy. As I said, there's plenty of guys that, are getting a lot of praise, right? I mean, there's 6 guys that could easily go off the board in the top 10, right? I mean, you're looking at Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, in whatever order. And you're looking at J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, in any order. All 6 of those guys could be off the top 10, top 12, whatever the case may be. The one thing I do know, and history's told us, all of them aren't going to be great. So, I could be wrong, you could be wrong, I could be right, you could be right. I don't know. We'll find out. But every person, I think, has their own flavor of what they like to choose. Just like teams. They have certain guys that they'll look at and say, you know what, I prefer that guy over that guy, even though, that guy won a lot in college. Or, that guy has injury history, but he hasn't been injured the last couple of years. Or that guy's a little bit thin, but he runs, he's dynamic, has a strong arm. Or, that guy was the Heisman Trophy winner, but then took a step back. Or that guy was really good in 2022, but took a step back in 2023. He comes from North Carolina, but we still think he could be a good quarterback. Or this guy came from Auburn, wasn't very good there, but the last 2 years in Oregon was really well. You know what I mean? Like, we can make arguments and conversations for everybody on why they could be good. Or even a guy like Spencer Rattler. Well, coming out of high school, he had all the hype around him, so he wasn't quite as mature as he needed to be. Went to Oklahoma, got kind of lost in the shuffle, got beat out by Caleb Williams, who eventually won the Heisman Trophy. Went to South Carolina, did some really good things. Like, we can make the argument and the case for everybody. But the one thing I know about all the quarterbacks in the draft, they're not all going to be good. I mean, you can go back in the history of guys drafted and know they ain't all going to be good. So it's up to the Raiders and their coaching staff and their scouting team to find the one that's going to be good if they do make that move. The other thing I do know about the quarterback position, Aiden O'Connell's there. He's in the mix. I think a veteran probably should be added to the mix. That could be a Russell Wilson, especially at the price. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. They think I'm pounding the table for Russell Wilson. I'm not. But if you get a guy at $1.2 million, you can use a lot of that salary to talk about stuff and fill voids like I talked about in segment number 2, the defensive line, the offensive line, and maybe others. Maybe even get greedy and get a specialist player. So I could see a Russell Wilson, I could see a rookie and Aiden O'Connell all battling out in camp, and I think that's fine. I don't have no problem with that. I've actually talked about those kind of battles quite a bit. So I'm with you. I'm definitely not against any of the quarterbacks. I'm not huge. Like I said, J.J. McCarthy's not a guy I'm pounding the table for. Bo Nix isn't either. But I do recognize that they all have talent, and I think I remember right after the regular season ended and college football wrapped up, and I started talking about quarterbacks that should be on the radar of the Raiders. I mentioned all these guys. All 6 of them should be on the radar, and they should decide who they think that they like and who they think fits with what they want to do the most. It's not about what I want them to do or you want them to do. It's what they want to do and who fits the best. But thanks, Doug, for that. I appreciate you, and that's all I got time for. Got a text from Cruz in Oregon. We'll get that tomorrow. Rich in the 831, same thing, and Will in the 816 as well. Plus, we'll have more news and notes. We'll have plenty more conversation. Got a big-time show lined up today on Raider Nation Radio 920. Former Super Bowl head coach Brian Billick is going to be a part of the show. Steve Weiss from NFL Network is going to be a part of the show. My man Vic Taver is going to be a part of the show. I mean, I got a star-studded affair, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness. So anything good that I get from that, I may bring to the podcast for tomorrow, so you get a chance to hear that as well. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.